the parents will get closer to the children, and the children will get closer to the parents. We hope that this week, in the merit of all of us studying all throughout the world, the section of the Torah which speaks about the connection of the parents to the children and the children to the parents, may all of the children get closer to the parents. May all of the parents get closer to the children. May this be the week of Eliyahu Hanavi. V'heshiv lev avot al banim, v'lev banim al avotam. Thank you so much for listening.
I think others would be interested in your response to this question, and please add what you'd like. Part of this Parsha has a theme of deception. For example, between Yaakov and Esau and their father's blessing. If non-Jews have an interest in Jewish thought through learning, imitation, or even practice, is there not a big risk of deception getting in the way of a potential true yearning for HaShavua?
If I understand the question correctly, you're asking me whether, first, I don't think it's only non-Jews. I think anyone studying this Torah section, anyone trying to get closer. How do we read the story about, that's the question, right? How do we read the story about Yaakov and Esav, and Yaakov pretending to be Esav and receiving the blessing? Now, there are at least two different approaches to this question. I'm not going to be the one to decide, just to mention two different approaches. And one approach is that when dealing with Esav, when dealing with Esau on a certain level, it depends on how you understand Esau's personality. When dealing with Esav, a person cannot merely follow the pathway that they would be following if they were dealing only with people who are on the level of Jacob. As we read, Im navar titavar, im ikesh titapal, that maybe sometimes a person has to treat the other person the same way that they're treating them. So I don't know. There are those who justify, in rabbinic literature, there is an approach that justifies the behavior of our father and says that this is the way that he was dealing with the many forms of suffering that he suffered in the hands of Esau. However, there is another school of thought. There is another school of thought that points out that the very great leader of our nation, the patriarch of our nation, who in a certain sense went through certain kinds of actions that you called, I think, deception. I'm not going to judge our father Yaakov, nor our mother Rivka, who told him to do this. Is it proper for him to listen to his mother? It's not proper to listen to his mother. Is this some kind of prophetic message according to one school of thought, as is indicated in the Aramaic translation, Aramaic commentary, that she was told to do this by some kind of divine message? But according to one school of thought, if you just turn a few pages in the Torah, one finds that Yaakov is also being deceived by others. In at least the initial story, if you remember, when he comes to the land and he wants to marry one woman, and then he ends up marrying the other woman, the whole story of Rachel and Leah reminds us somewhat, at least according to Midrashic ears, of something connected to this story as well. Is there some kind of a poetic justice in what's going on in that story? Is that a way of reading it? Several people have written on this theme. I think Professor Nechama Leibowitz, for instance, Shalom, I think she dedicated an essay to this very topic, is the fact that the children of Yaakov later in life, if you remember, when they want to have Yaakov believe that Yosef is no longer living, so they fool him. Vayitbelu et hakutonet badam. They come to him, and through deception, they present his special mantle, his special cloak, soaked in blood, seemingly indicating that Yosef is no longer living. Is that merely coincidental that at least in two different occasions we find the family of Yaakov fooling Yaakov? Or does it have something to do with this story? I'm not wise enough or learned enough to comment, just merely to point out different possibilities. I think sometimes the greatest level of wisdom is to say that one doesn't know. To Yodea she'eino Yodea. It's interesting that in our tradition, the person who most personifies truth is our father Yaakov. Titein emet liYaakov. And so he's considered the person of truth. And maybe sometimes one of the greatest challenges to the person of truth is when do you have to do something which is not true. I'm not going to pass judgment. I leave it to people much greater than myself. But there are different ways of reading the story. And I think each person should study it in accordance with the tradition and with the commentaries that they understand. I think to stand in judgment on our father Yaakov, if you're asking about people trying to, I think you said, Choser b'teshuvah, of Havu mitunim badin, be slow in judgment. Be slow in judgment. It doesn't only apply to the person down the block or to our employer or our employee. I think Havu mitunim badin, which is one of the first teachings in the ethics of the fathers, which is a basic teaching in Judaism, teaches us that be slow, be deliberate in judgment. It's easy to just say he was wicked, he was terrible, he was deceitful, he went against the teaching of truth. I think there's much more to the story. The very fact that this story is such a basic story in Torah, obviously, all of the stories in the book of Bereshit, which seem so complicated, why couldn't it just be that if Yaakov is supposed to receive the blessing, that he receives the blessing? Why does it have to be Jacob and Esau and Esau and Jacob? This is part of a mystery, a divine mystery. And I think to simplify it, in either case, either just say that Yaakov was completely correct, or to say that Yaakov was completely incorrect, I think does not do justice to the depth of the story that we're studying. And I would hope that the exposure to the truth of the Torah, the exposure to the light of God, to the light of truth, to the light of wisdom, to the light of Judaism, would be so strong that even if they intended a certain pathway, they will change their ways. I remember, Henny's here, I think. I remember it must have been about 29 years ago, or 30 years ago, in our home. It was the first year we were here. It was about 30 years ago. And we had a guest for Shabbat. And thank God we had a few guests for Shabbat. And after Shabbat, generally, within a half hour, within an hour, surely within 2 hours, most people are no longer in the house because Shabbat is basically over. And there was this one person who stayed. And he stayed and he stayed. So we went over and just asked him, is everything okay? And he didn't really answer us right away. And then he said, is there anything we can do for you? He said, I'm just a little confused. Can we help you in any way? And then after a long time, he decided to speak with us. I didn't know him. He spent Shabbat with us. He ate the meals with us on Shabbat. And it turns out that he was a missionary who had come to Israel, a Jew, who had come with a group of several other people to missionize Jews, unfortunately. And he said, I'm just very confused after Shabbat. And I don't know what to do because here I am, I'm supposed to be arriving in Israel to missionize. And this Jewish celebration seems to be so real and so legitimate. And the teachings seem to be so on it. And I don't know, and I don't want to speak about myself, but I invited his whole group to meet with us on Sunday. And I'm sharing only success stories. There are many non-success stories, I don't want you to think it's like 100% success, but this is a success story, I think. Thank God. And he came with his whole group of 4 others on Sunday. And this gentleman who had come to Israel for the purpose of being a missionary left that group, went to a yeshiva, a bona fide yeshiva, became a Torah student, a Torah scholar, and thank God is married with children and a very active member in the Torah community. So I hope that even if a person comes with negative intention, the light of Torah should be so strong and the sweetness of truth should be so great that they will change their agenda once they're exposed to Torah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shavua tov, everybody. Shavua tov, Shavua tov. Shavua tov, Shavua tov. Hallelujah.